Another signature event is on tap this weekend. It is the Genesis Invitational, this year being held at Torrey Pines due to the wildfires in Los Angeles. So a bit of different setup for this week, but it is a loaded field. Scotty Scheffler is here. Rory McIlroy, recent winner, is here. Colin Morikawa, Justin Thomas, and all the other key players are in the mix for this weekend. So loaded field to break down. Pretty interesting betting card, I think, for this week. We'll also talk some DFS to get you ready for the Genesis Invitational. Welcome on into the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is Jim Sannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Tuesday by Brandon Gdula. You can find him on X at Gdula13. He is on Blue Sky at Gdula. Check out his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, Super Bowl is wrapped up. It is fully now golf season with the players. I would kind of say a stretch. I'll say just around the corner. That might be stretching it a bit, but officially into full-on golf season. How you doing today?
Yeah, we're on the road to the
I'll
players and the Masters. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
So we'll start there. I guess we can say that much. But yeah, signature event this week. Pretty loaded field. Tiger Woods did withdraw, but no real shortage of big names. No shortage of big names playing big time golf either. So coming off of a weekend that was like, I don't know, the WM Phoenix Open was not gripping necessarily.
It like flirted with being gripping because like Spieth was up there and that was kind of fun. It's like, okay, if Dietrich slips, we could have a fun event. You know, Scotty was making a bit of a run early Saturday. It flirted with being fun, and then Dietrich's like, nah, dog, I got this. And it was like, okay, cool, he's done.
Yeah, I mean, he went out and shot a 65 low round on Sunday to just, make it like, okay, let's get ready for the Super Bowl. And then Super Bowl also not exactly close necessarily. It was like the least likely game script for 62 total points that I could have thought of, basically. Yeah. But now we're on to, like you said, the road to I was gonna say the majors, but I don't want to omit the players, but it's not really like the road to the players specifically, but we're on the road to like the peak of golf season. So.
Okay, I can add to that. You were talking about the score. I was in a squares contest where it paid out for every score. Like every time there was a score, it paid out. Mm-hmm. I had the squares 4-0 for Chiefs 4, Eagles 0. And I was like, okay, there are a lot of iterations of this. Like, 24-20 pays out, 14-20, 14-10, 14-0, stuff like that. I was like, okay, cool. I've got some paths here to get even like 34-30 I thought was in play. Did not think 14-40 would be the score that paid out for that square. So yes, a bit of a different way things broke across the entirety of that game.
Yeah, 4-0, the fourth best post-game score possible, according to someone's research on FanDuel Research. But
interesting. Sounds like a good site, FanDuel.com/research. I'll keep that in mind for future Super Bowl squares insights so I can know whether I've got a shot at that puppy for next year. But for today, we're going to break down the Genesis Invitational, letting you know what you got to know about Torrey Pines South for this year, which golfers did well when they were here, such a long time ago, and then break down our top bets and our top DFS plays for this week. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel Research Podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us here every Tuesday, breaking down the best bets and DFS plays for that week's PGA Tour event. Of course, we are also on the new YouTube page. More on that in a second. But the podcast feed, FanDuel Research Podcast. As mentioned, FanDuel Golf Betting is where you can find the YouTube version of this show. FanDuel Golf Betting. We've also got shorts there via Allie McCann, breaking down her thoughts on various golfing topics. Find some shorts there from us as we break down our best bets all over on the same feed. So go to the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page, turn on notifications, subscribe, and leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate those of you watching on YouTube as always. March is almost here, and college basketball is reaching its most exciting stretch of the season. See, I said golf. They've got college basketball. So Boohoo Jim. Right now, new customers on FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's $150 to bet on everything from conference clashes to tournament upsets and even on who's cutting down the nets. If you've been waiting to join FanDuel, there is no better time. The app is easy to use, and when you win, you'll get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel and get in on the college hoops action before March takes over. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit MD Gambling Help Org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelpline.ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's take a look now at the Genesis Invitational again. This event is being played at Torrey Pines South instead of Riviera Country Club due to the Los Angeles wildfires. They've moved it up here so they can focus more important efforts down in LA. Torrey Pines South just hosted the Farmers Insurance Open for 3 of the 4 rounds a couple weeks ago. Harris English won that event. Despite that, his betting odds did lengthen overnight. I think that's appropriate, but I thought it was very interesting that that did happen with English. It also hosted the U.S. Open itself back in 2021. Bit of a different layout there because it's a U.S. Open, but still noteworthy was Torrey Pines South. Torrey Pines South, of course, 7,765 yards in a par 72. There are 72 golfers in the field, and it is a no-cut event because it is a signature event. Now, Brandon, typically we talk Torrey Pines. We're discussing the 2-course layout. North Course not in the mix for this week. So what should people know about Torrey Pines South in the case they were not here with us a couple of weeks ago?
Well, if they weren't, welcome. Hopefully, this is a good first experience for you, or I guess technically, maybe not your first experience with us if you started after the Farmers, but I don't know. Maybe with the signature event, this is some people's
Welcome back regardless.
First for it. Welcome or welcome back, whichever applies to you. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's a long par 72 with tight fairways, smaller POA greens. Some interesting notes exist in the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. It's a great resource that I rely on pretty heavily. Couple things here. The director of agronomy at Torrey Pines has said that this is the driest winter he's experienced in his 9 years.
Dry for now, buddy. As we look at the weather forecast,
is it going to rain?
Dry for now. It will not be dry on Thursday or Friday.
Interesting. With the last significant rain event in early April. So could rain this week, but I think that's interesting. And also another thing, there's been a lot of great weather, dry weather, not that surprising in California, but a lot of rounds played at Torrey Pines, which, 3 weeks ago, a lot of rounds were played here from a PGA Tour standpoint as well. So course could play a little bit rougher, bumpier, but in terms of okay, are they going to change it up a ton? Are they going to try to make it play differently? Not really. The yardages, the cuts are the same as they were for the Farmers Insurance Open, again, 3 weeks ago. Not everybody in this field played that event. Again, that event also included 1 round on the North Course. Torrey Pines history is always a little bit tricky. We'll get into that in a bit, but it's going to be a lot of similarities to what we saw just 3 weeks ago. And what stood out there, kind of to me, enough of the same where I don't want to try to overcomplicate things and kind of run this one back. Harris English, as you mentioned, won. So if you look at Torrey Pines history, usually longer drivers have an advantage, but the winners themselves aren't necessarily all big hitters. What it really, I think, comes down to is being short is bad, being long is good, and being okay is okay. So long as you have the rest of... Why are you smirking at me?
Just the phrase "being short is bad" made me laugh. Oh.
No, I just meant with driving distance.
Yeah.
That's all.
We're not heightists on this podcast.
No, not at all.
Just to be clear.
Not at all. All right. Getting back to it. So prior to English's win, each of the last 5 winners had ranked top 10 in both strokes gained putting out of the 3 measured shot length rounds that we had. And English was 3rd during his win. But also, you're basically looking for the best putters out of the best tee to green players / ball strikers. And an important note here, and I'm going to kind of actually throw this in for once. The U.S. Open held here in 2021 when Jon Rahm won. He was 20th in putting during his win. Played a little bit differently for the U.S. Open than it will for this week and for 3 weeks ago, etc. But really what we're kind of boiling things down to is you want good ball striking. So key stats for me, strokes gained approach, strokes gained off the tee with an emphasis on driving distance, but it's not a must. According to Data Golf, there's an above average number of approach shots from 200 plus yards. So you can look at something like proximity from 200 plus, or speaking of Data Golf, they have an approach skill tool. Shows a lot of cool breakdowns, including strokes gained per shot from certain distances. So I'm looking at proximity from 200 plus. And then I want putting. Not necessarily looking too much at POA splits. I try to factor in splits a little bit in terms of surface, but it's such a small piece to the puzzle that I never like to overweight it, even though it's a little bit of a rare surface for this week.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And again, we were here pretty recently, kind of know what to expect. We don't need distance, but it is definitely a plus. And I'll be talking about a lot of guys who have that juice throughout the show for today, because I'm definitely keen on some guys who can nuke it off the tee. Let's begin things, though, by talking about course history and zeroing in on some golfers who have done well at Torrey Pines South in the past. Brandon, who stands out to you when you look at the data you prefer for this kind of endeavor?
A nice roundabout way to phrase it.
Yeah, I didn't really know where I was going, but we landed the plane eventually, which is more. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think it's not a bad week to be roundabout with that comment.
See, I'm not a practice. I had a day off of podcasting yesterday, and I'm just like, I'm we gotta get back into form. I'm not used to going a full day without talking.
Yeah, the rust narrative is real.
That's right.
But it is tricky to look at Torrey Pines in past history, because when you get the Farmers, you get around to the North Course. It's not impossible by any means to filter that out, but we also have that U.S. Open all at the South Course. So I'm simplifying it because past history is such a small piece of this. I guess I should also clarify, I'm not looking at past form at Riviera / the Genesis at all. Just want to kind of clarify that one. But at Torrey Pines in total, the best golfers in terms of total strokes gained over the last 5 events at Torrey Pines, which are the last 4 Farmers, including the one 3 weeks ago, and the 2021 U.S. Open. So this is going to be a little bit of a unique split probably from what you see. You can also find strokes gained specifically at the South Course. It's not that hard. But for me, the names that lead this list are Sungjae Im. His salary is $10,800 on FanDuel this week. He was 4th here 3 weeks ago. Missed the cut 4th, 6th, and 35th, dating back over this 5-year span. And he's now lost approach in 3 of his last 4 events. Sungjae is a golfer who I liked a lot really early on in his career. He then kind of moved into a profile of being not an elite iron player. And then things got a little bit better and flattened out a little bit, but this isn't what you want to see necessarily. Maybe I'm just overly sensitive to Sungjae and his irons, but I've been there with Sungjae recently. A little bit not what I want to see from him super recently, but that's okay. A lot of other good names have played Torrey Pines well in this 5-event sample, including Hideki Matsuyama, whose salary is $11,600, 32nd, 13th, 9th, 30th, 26th. Lengthy history at Torrey behind that. In 2025 for Hideki, he won the Century, T16 at the Sony Open, T32 at Farmers, T48 at Pebble, and T25 last week at the the WM Phoenix Open. Colin Morikawa, though, is next up. It's a small sample, a missed cut, a third, and a fourth. I really like Morikawa this week. His irons have been hot of late. At Torrey in the past, his putter can spike, and one of my favorite things about Morikawa is that the putting from within 15 feet is really good. 87th percentile on tour since the start of last season. Jason Day's fourth on the list at 10,400. He's a great putter. He's got 2 top 10s over the last 4 starts for him. Consistent approach in 4 straight events since the start of 2025. And he also won at Torrey in 2018, which is not included even on this list. Then we get our Canadian, our guy of late, Taylor Pendrith, 9,800, 7th here 3 weeks ago, 9th, 60th, 16th, and missed cut. But he's one of the best ball strikers in the field. He's always got spike potential on the greens with the putter. And again, that T7 here goes along with good ball striking. I'm going to rattle off a couple other names, though, and then we'll kind of circle back to who jumps out. Sam Stevens, 92. He was second here 3 weeks ago, 43rd and 13th. Salary's low at 9,200. Keegan Bradley, 9,400 is the salary. Really consistent ball striking. Short game's not ideal, but 15th, 43rd, 2nd, 65th. I'm assuming, I haven't looked. I'm assuming your guy, Justin Thomas, this week at 11,400. Hasn't played here the last 2 events, but top 25 in 4 career starts for him. T6 at the WM Phoenix Open, really great irons. Harris English, of course, makes the list after his win 3 weeks ago. Salary's 9,500. Long win odds at 90-1. Will Zalatoris, 10,000. 13th missed cut, 2nd missed cut. Didn't play here 3 weeks ago. Really up and down form for him of late. And then just because I had to, Scotty Scheffler. Just 2 starts in this sample, but did miss the cut here in 2020 and 2021. But T7 at the US Open and then T20 here in 2022. In 2025, he's been T9 at Pebble, T25 at the WM Phoenix Open with positive approach off the tee and putting, but negative around the green play. Salary's 13.2. He's going to be a big discussion point, but kind of a really interesting mix of names on this board. Who stands out to you?
I think a theme more so stood out to me. If the top 4 guys you look at, Sungjae Im, Hideki Matsuyama, Colin Morikawa, Jason Day, none of those guys fall in the bucket of being bombers. And I think that kind of goes to back up your original point of you don't need to be a bomber to do well here, but it's like you can't be short necessarily. None of those guys are short. They're all about average. Over the past 6 months per Data Golf, Colin Morikawa, 1.33 above the field in terms of distance per round. Hideki Matsuyama 2.25, Sungjae Im 0.16, and then the other one was Jason Day. Jason Day 1.21. So they're all like neutral off the tee. So you can gain strokes while being neutral off the tee. That's fine. So like Scotty Scheffler is a guy who recently the distance has not been amazing. That's fine. Who cares? It's Scotty Scheffler. So I think that was the bigger takeaway from me was kind of reinforcing it is great to have distance. I love a lot of guys this week who have distance. It is not a prerequisite to bet them or play them in DFS. So that to me is a bigger takeaway. Is kind of reinforcing your initial point of distance is good. It is not an absolute must have.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the hardest things to apply and know. Like we deal with the data. We let the numbers like lead us to places, but there's also a level of, I'll say eye test, but it's not specifically like watching golf, which I do watch a lot of golf, but you're not going to see every shot. You're not going to know the context of every shot that comes back from commercial and someone's hacking it out of the rough. It's like, what happened? Did it run through the fairway? Was it like, it's a matter of letting the long-term overall stats like lead us in a direction and then still having enough nuance behind that. So that's why we talk about at accuracy courses. We're not just listing out the most accurate drivers and playing them, but also here, even though distance, it's like all of the data screams distance is important. But you look at like the winners, it's like, yeah, but they're not the longest, the best overall form. Like I get it. So
Like you
I
can
think
find a
that's
Luke List in there, but he's not everyone's Luke List and the list of
Yeah.
winners at Torrey Pines.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point to make here.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dig into current form. We talk about golfers with the best form entering this weekend at the Genesis. Who stands out to you when you look at your data there?
So over the last 3 months, according to Data Golf, their field strength adjusted strokes gain numbers, there's 3 names above a 3.0 in terms of true strokes gain per round. Again, 3 months, small samples, but that's what I'm looking for. First name is Scotty Scheffler. In his 3 events, he's at a plus 3.18, which is disgusting. It would basically say he'd beat an average golfer if they played to their baselines over 4 rounds by like 12 and a half to 13 shots, which is sick. But Colin Morikawa, it's a 2 event sample for him. He's at a 3.14. It's almost an identical number. More on Morikawa later. And then Rory is at a 3.02 before a drop off to Justin Thomas at 2.34. Now, do you want to talk about any of those before I kind of do like the rest of the section?
Yeah, I think we can take a look at overall like the top of the odds board for this week, because Scotty Scheffler is 4-1, followed by Rory at 7, Morikawa 14. So the 3 guys you mentioned are the 3 favorites for this week. I know Scotty hasn't been like lights out in his first 2 events back. Were you surprised at all that he was 4-1 for this week, given where we've sometimes seen him? I know it's a signature event, so it's a very tough field. Were you surprised at all that he was sitting at 4-1 or no?
So he was plus 360.
Mm-hmm.
He also, just because I was curious, he's plus 470 to win the Players, which is a full field event. So, like, yeah, that's still like massive difference, because whenever the lower you get with these odds, like,
Right.
the
Like
more
3-1 is 25%, and 4-1 is 20%. So it like scales big time. Yeah.
So it's a big time like shift, but it is interesting. And the other variable in this is if you look at what he's done, and I mentioned this when I talked about Scheffler already, in 2025, so after his freak accident, his hand injury, he has gained off the tee in both of his starts. He's gained approach in both of his starts. He's gained putting in both of his starts, but he's lost around the green in both of his starts, which really is not typical of Scotty, because he's kind of a machine. And outside of the putting, he's, to simplify, the best or one of the best at all 3 tee to green facets. So if anybody was like looking at Scotty in recent weeks and they see this 4-1, there's a lot to like, because all that is missing right now is that around the green play. And credit to Sully on the No Laying Up podcast, but he pointed out the last time Scotty's gone 3 straight starts without, so he's finished T9 at Pebble and T25 at the WM Phoenix Open. The last time he went 3 straight starts without a win was this time last year, when he was T6 at Pebble, T3 at the WM Phoenix Open, and T10 at Genesis, and he lost almost a shot per round on the greens at the Genesis. So, look, he's the easiest guy to make a case for ever and always. I think that he's a big risk this week if you kind of just dismiss him out of hand.
Yeah, I will say that the way I viewed it was this: I did not bet him at 4-1. I have 3 outrights I've placed for this week, and seeing that Scotty was only 4-1 did give me a bit of concern. Like, okay, is this false value in these guys? Like, is Scotty being undervalued to the point where like I'm overlooking him? I don't think I am. I think those guys are actually values, so I still was okay with them even when I gave it this thought. But like that thought did cross my mind of, are we overlooking Scotty too much in that regard? Again, maybe not betting him, but like over or under accounting for him with liking other outrights. Again, I was still okay with those 3 that I did, which we'll talk about here in a bit, but the thought did cross my mind, at least I would say.
Like this is exactly the recipe you would want for Scotty, basically, of everything's there, but he just kind of struggled around the greens.
Yeah.
And maybe like the hand injury is affecting his touch or something like that. Could be the case, but the fact that he's striping it as well as he is and putting it as well kind of makes me think that the chipping is just giving us a better number. I know it's 4-1. I get it. But this guy's that good where you're going to have to pay something around there. So that's why he's really hard to. The salary is difficult to get to from a DFS standpoint. But boy, you kind of look at Rory. He's peaking right now with the putter. Morikawa's knocking on the door, but it just really feels like Scheffler is still in his own tier.
Yeah. I agree with that as well. Okay. Who else had noteworthy form among guys who are not among the 3 betting favorites for this week?
So really what I like to do with this section is look at golfers with salaries of 10,000 or lower with the best recent strokes gained tee to green number, or sorry, true strokes gained numbers per round. And I'm going to cheat a little bit and go with Sepp Straka at 10,100 because he's at a 2.02. That is pretty elevated from like whenever we do this constantly, you're kind of looking at a 2 being really strong, even over a potentially smaller sample. But he won the American Express, was T7 at Pebble, and 15th at the WM Phoenix Open. He's got positive approach play in 8 straight measured events.
Aggressively positive.
Yes.
It's actually at least a stroke per round in all 8 of those. Well, in the measured rounds.
That's gnarly.
Yeah.
And like it kind of makes sense though. He's a really good golfer. He's 4th over the last 3 months. In true strokes gained approach, which does account for field strength adjustments. So he's like definitely worth taking a look at, but he's not the only name in that tier with good form. Rasmus Højgaard, he's also not the only name with great approach play. He has positive approach in 14 straight measured events. His salary is 9,900, but he's at a 1.65 true strokes gained per round. He recently finished T22 at Pebble and T12 at the WM Phoenix Open. Thomas Dietrich, who won what felt like by 1,000 shots last week. I know it wasn't quite that, but it was close to it. His salary is 9,600. He's at a 1.55. T20 and T15 here the last 2 years. So, again, T15 here 3 weeks ago. Your guy, Mav McNeely, 9,500. He's at a 1.39. Same as Keegan Bradley, whose salary is 9,400. We've both been pretty into Robert McIntyre lately. He's at a 1.38. So just basically the same number there. Salary's 9,900. Cam Davis, 8,400 is the salary. But he is at a 1.37 in the sample. And then Austin Eckroat, 8,100 is the salary. 1.28 true strokes gained per round before a bit of a drop off. So not an abundance of low salaried golfers with elevated super recent form. Anybody jump out to you on this list?
So I think it's more about, again, like it's sentiment. It's a broader thing. Yeah, similar to the history discussion. I think this upper 9 range, includes Straka in there at 10-1. It's a really good range this week. And we don't always get that. Like there are a lot of events where I'm like, I don't care about this range. I'll skip over it happily. I'm fine being top heavy, missing out here. I think the 9,000 range is the low 9,000 range is the same. I don't think that's the case this week. Like Straka, like Rasmus, Big Shot Bob coming through with the T10 last week. Taylor Pendrith, T10 Master at 98. I don't mind Sam Burns at 97. I think that's somewhat interesting too. McNeely 95. Like that upper 9 range / Straka at 10-1 is really good. And you got Shane Lowry and Tommy Fleetwood right above that too. That's not bad. So like I like this mid range a lot this week more than I usually do. The reason that is something I wanted to bring up with you is because you mentioned we got Scotty at 13-2, Rory 12-5. If you want to get to them, it does hinder your abilities to get back into that range. I am willing to use golfers in the in the upper 7,000 range, maybe low 8,000 range in order to make that happen. Are you okay with that? Do you view that mid range as being worth it in order to ensure you have exposure to these guys while not ignoring Scotty, Rory, etc.?
Can you clarify? Are you trying to get Scotty plus who's your second name then?
I like JT at 11-4. So let's go with
Yeah, try
Scotty,
that because I'm interested.
Scotty Scheffler, Justin Thomas. That leaves you 88.50 left.
It's tight. I mean, if you go Scotty with like my question, kind of what I thought you were going to is like, what if you do Scotty and I slightly prefer McIntyre to Højgaard.
So just pepper the mid range.
So if you go Scotty, McIntyre, Pendrith, and I like Henley at 96, that's 87.50. This is your build of assuming that Scotty goes out and wins.
Yeah.
And therefore it's hard for Rory and Morikawa and JT, not to besmirch anyone else up there, but just the names that were probably more likely to play, that they don't win because Scotty wins. So this is slightly appealing, but if you do go with JT, you're probably only getting back to one of these names.
Yeah.
And that's where things get tricky. It's kind of the best range. Like this, the best range is Scotty, Rory, Morikawa, like unsurprisingly. But I would say there's 4 to 5 names in that between Straka and Henley, give or take. But it's really hard to play. So
yeah,
I'm probably still more likely to go Scotty and I don't know, maybe like a Sung Jae, but it's really difficult because you do kind of handcuff yourself immediately by assuming the best out of a golfer in the 7K range.
I will say that I've also considered, if you're watching YouTube, the build that I have up there where I jumped down from Scotty to Rory, because Rory is also in phenomenal form right now, and it is a distance course, and Rory has that juice. Save $700. Add him a JT, plug in, I think Gary Woodland's my favorite 7,000 golfer at 78. You got 94.33 left for 3 slots, but I can get 2 guys in that mid-range. I don't mind that build either. So I think that basically what I'm saying is that the appeal of that range is forcing me to consider some different routes this week. Maybe I don't automatically lock in Scheffler. I'd still love to get there. And I'll still have him on a good chunk of lineups, but it does reduce my projected roster rate for him because I know that I want to have more exposure to the mid-range, and $700 with him and Rory can go a long way. So I think that's for me kind of what it came down to there.
Yeah, I still want to get to a second stud more than just 3 names in that that range, just due to the win equity. And I think that you're not giving up too much based on the bottom of the lineup. With that said, I want to make sure it's not like a hard and fast rule, but I think multiple golfers in the 7K range, I just don't see enough down there to want to make that like a primary build.
I'm not going with 2. I think I can do 1 and still be good. I think I can make that work. Yeah. Okay. So overall, willing to get a little bit different this week in order to pepper that mid-range. The mid-range is really good for this week. Weather, not really good. Probably really good for San Diego, honestly, based on the weather you were talking about before, but it's going to rain a lot. High chance of rain Thursday, with wind increasing from 8 miles per hour to 13 miles per hour during the day. It's going to spike at around 1 p.m. So not like super late, and again, it is a no-cut event, which means there are fewer golfers, which means the wave differentials are not as big as usual, but also the wind spike pretty early Friday too, with rain in the morning. It dwindles away throughout the day, so going to be wet both Thursday and Friday, which means the ball may not bounce as much after it lands and stuff like that. So keep that in mind, but also pretty windy both those days. More mild wind over the weekend. So that's not going to be as big of a factor there, but weather will play a factor both Thursday and Friday. I don't think there's a situation you want to target guys with later early tee times based on that, but just noting that the weather could be impactful for this week. Let's take a look now at the betting odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Brandon, as mentioned, Scotty Scheffler is the favorite to win this week, 4-1. Followed by Rory McIlroy, 7-1. Colin Morikawa, 14-1. Let's begin things with the outright discussion. When you are looking at the outrights at FanDuel Sportsbook, which golfers stand out to you this week?
I like Colin Morikawa. I had to kind of do a double take, and I'm actually doing it again just to make sure that I'm not forgetting something, but he has not won in a long time. His last win was in October 2023, and he has not he has not really given me a reason to think that he can't win. Like, you pointed this out last week, I think it was. He's gaining distance, and that's really appealing. But the thing for me with Morikawa that really jumps out is he's like become a really good putter. So I like to look at splits from within 15 feet. I've just kind of done some research on it. Seems like you can control making putts from within 15 feet and not so much beyond 15 feet. So that's kind of why it's my sort of go-to putting stat. Since the start of last season, he's an 87th percentile putter from within 15 feet. We know he's one of the best ball strikers in any field that he's in, but he's actually the only golfer, according to Data Golf, over everyone's last 50 rounds to rank top 15 in strokes gained off the tee, approach, and putting. Like, at some point when you keep knocking on the door, it's going to fall in and you're going to convert. So for me with Morikawa, I just frankly think that the number's right, the form is right, and if someone's going to have to battle Scotty or Rory to go out and win, like Morikawa can do it. So for me, he's the first name I look at this week at 14-1.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason I was on him a couple weeks ago at that Pebble Beach was, like you said, I think he's just been so close so often. He changed his putter at the Masters last year. He's had 3 runner finishes since then. He's had a couple of fourths in there as well. 17th at Pebble Beach too. So like he's been right there. And they've all been solo seconds too. Not like tied for seconds, solo seconds and all those for Morikawa. So he's been there a bunch. I understand why you're there. 14 is a good number. I like a guy in that range a bit more, but like he does make me quibble, does make me pause a bit about that other one. I like there. So Morikawa 14, your first outright. Any other outrights you like for this week?
Going with the Canadian Taylor Pendrith at 35-1. He's moved up. Like I kind of had like the name scare of, all right, even better. Yeah. All right. Love that. Kind of had a little bit of a name scare with like Patrick Cantlay and Taylor Pendrith, and it's like, am I overlooking Patrick Cantlay at 33 or right now Tommy Fleetwood at 4,000? But like, it's kind of a disservice to Pendrith for how good he's been and what his game signals he can do. He's finished T13 at Century, T45 at the Sony Open, T7 at the Farmers, T9 at Pebble, and that's all in 2025. That T7 at the Farmers, again, mostly at Torrey Pines South. He also finished T9 in 2024 at Torrey. And over the last 50 rounds, he's 6th in strokes gained ball striking. I mentioned that 15 feet sample from within, 84th percentile putter. Since the start of the last season, it all kind of lines up for Pendrith for me this week. Plus 4,000. Frankly, a really good number for Pendrith.
I agree. And he is also one of my outrights for this week. So you've got Taylor Pendrith at 40 and Colin Morikawa at 14. As mentioned, Pendrith one of mine at 40-1. I don't need distance, but it is really nice to have it. And Pendrith definitely has that. Good irons. They've been really good for about a year now, frankly, for Pendrith with the irons being solid. You mentioned the putter. Long term, he's a very good putter. I think you said 84th percentile within 15 feet since the start of last year. The putter for him, when he's had these good finishes recently, has not been there. And I think that's why he's so interesting, is we know he's a good putter. He hasn't been like lights out there. And if he gets one of those like spike weeks with the putter, he's going to win at some point in the very near future. So I like him top 10 plus 330 as well. But for me, the outright 40-1, especially now that it's lengthened, that's going to be really hard for me to turn down. So I think the Pendrith just kind of checks every box this week, even boxes I don't need, but do like. And that's pretty appealing for sure. Other outright I like for this week is Justin Thomas, right in that Morikawa range, because Justin Thomas sitting at 18-1 to win for this week. Similar to Morikawa, just playing some really good golf right now, but hasn't translated to a win. The putter for JT has been fine, and I'll take fine for him, but the distance has been really good since the new year. He's finished 26th, 2nd, 48th, and 6th. He's had awesome approach in all 4 of those events. And you look at JT at Torrey Pines, the finishes have not been amazing, but also he has played here 5 times, so good experience. Only one of those finishes has been lower than 25th. So it's not bad history. We know that JT has not been himself for a while now. I think we're kind of getting him back to that range finally. And he's 18-1, which is not a bad number, I don't think, despite how good this field is. So you give me Justin Thomas distance with tremendous irons and a putter that's been at least improving of late. I think that's enough to justify him at 18-1 to win this event. Obviously, you like Morikawa more, which I think is a very defensible and very fair take. How far off are you at JT at 18-1, a bit below Morikawa?
Not that far. I know the numbers, again, probability-wise, quite different there. Would much rather still Morikawa at 14, just because it really comes down to, I think, the difference in perception of JT as a putter. I know as slipping, he always felt like a really good putter, and he was at different times. He's fine right now. It does go up and down, but like Morikawa just doesn't make a lot of bombs, which kind of banking on falling in eventually here. That's what it's going to take for him to turn one of those solo seconds into a win. So nothing against JT, but frankly, when I'm looking at those favorites, like those 4 real favorites, Morikawa is the name that I just feel best with from an overall standpoint.
Yep, that makes sense. So you're on Morikawa 14 and Taylor Pendrith at 40. I am also on Pendrith at 40 and Justin Thomas at 18-1. What about the non-outrights? Where are you seeing value there this week?
I like Sam Burns a good amount for a top 10 at plus 360. So he was kind of a second tier favorite last week, and just frankly, not someone I was that interested in whenever he was compared to the other favorites and co-favorites. Now he's just like the luster, I think, is worn off a bit after his T49. It was a rare week where he lost strokes putting, but his irons are good. He's a plus off the tee in terms of distance, and the form at Torrey historically not great, but his numbers doubled basically from an outright standpoint. That's a little bit too much. I think it's a little bit unfair to Sam Burns. So plus 360, I'm starting to see the value again on Burns. Also like Russell Henley to finish top 20 at plus 150. Henley's a name I talk about a lot, but T5 is last time out at Pebble. Really good putter, but he is a really good putter, so I'm not worried about that. And the irons are also great. If you look at if you take a really mathematical approach to it, he is one of the 10 most consistent iron players over the last 50 rounds in this field. 87th percentile putter from within 15 feet since the start of last season. I mean, there's just a reason that I like this guy a lot of different places. And he was T13 here in 2021 for that US Open. And I just think that, frankly, he's a better player than this number, and the model also identifies him at plus 150. So no issues there.
All right. So you were on Russell Henley top 20 plus 150 and Sam Burns top 10 plus 360. If you're watching YouTube, you can see that I have Sam Burns in the screen here for a top 20 at plus 150 because I also like Sam Burns, but I prefer the top 20 versus the top 10. No real reasoning behind that. Just kind of thought that he was a better suit for a top 20 personally. But the reason I'm on, what's that?
It's a tough field. So
yeah. I guess I was kind of surprised to see him down here because last week I agreed with you. I was like, I don't know, he's a little overvalued, couldn't quite get there. And then his irons look good for the first time since January 1st. And sure, the finish was not good, but it was for weird / non-Sam Burnsian reasons. So I actually have a higher opinion of him straight up this week than I did entering last week. And yet his odds have tumbled. And obviously, again, the field plays into that. But this seems like the ideal buy low spot, right, for Sam Burns?
I mean, the only thing against Burns is that he hasn't played well here in the past, but
yeah,
that's frankly it. And that's not something that I care too much about.
Right. And he hasn't played here since 2022. So it's been a while since we saw him. The 2022 event, he was wretched with his irons. But outside of that, he's been largely okay. Did finish 18th here in the 2021 Farmers, not the US Open. Missed the cut at the US Open. But I see no reason for concern. So I think that betting on Burns in general is something I want to do for this week. So I like him for a top 20 plus 150. The other bet that I like is I mentioned before that I had made 3 outright bets for this week. Those were Justin Thomas, Taylor Pendrith. The third one is Rasmus Højgaard. And for a recommendation perspective, I think Højgaard for a top 10 at plus 330 is pretty fun. Like I said, did bet him to win at 40-1, so I don't mind that either. But Højgaard, I just think in general is a guy I want to be in on. We talked about him when he made his first PGA Tour start this year. Like, okay, this guy has been on the DP World Tour tearing it up. We should keep an eye on him. I think we bet him that first week too. In the 2 events on the PGA Tours, like seeing him against pretty tough fields at, PGA Tour courses, he's finished 22nd and 12th, so kind of has legitimized that run. He has the distance to feast at this event. Irons have been good too. That was not just a blip at the DP World Tour. That's a big part of the reason we were on him initially, was the irons were so good. This is his first time playing at Torrey Pines South, which could be a downside, but I do like him overall. So Højgaard, Rasmus Højgaard, top 10 at plus 330 by their bet for this week. Any thoughts for you on Højgaard, Brandon?
Playing some good golf. Irons are undeniable right now, so no problems with wanting to get access to him this week at all.
Okay, so I've got Rasmus Højgaard top 10 plus 330, Sam Burns top 20 plus 150, Brandon has Burns for a top 10 at plus 360, and then Russell Henley top 20 at plus 150. Let's talk some DFS now. We've had some DFS talk already, and I think it's a pretty complex event for DFS in a good way, because I think there are a lot of different ways you could build lineups. I think that's a fun kind of event for DFS, where I have multiple routes to lineups that I think are really fun and really good. So when you look at the DFS salaries this week, Brandon, let's start things at the top. Who are the priorities for you this week?
A little bit of a cop-out, but one of the 3 of Scotty, Rory, and Morikawa, depending on contest type and risk tolerance.
Yeah.
But I really want to find ways to get to Scotty in a head-to-head situation, because the floor is immense. We don't talk about floor. You yell at me whenever we talk about floor. But he's got a mathematical floor. He's got upside, and he has pretty much everything you need at any setup, which is why he is who he is. But Rory's kind of closed that gap a little bit. My long-term weighted and adjusted strokes gained model still views about a half a shot per round between the 2 of them. But if I were to manually tweak stuff, I could see bumping Rory up a smidge. And for the savings, I don't think it's that outrageous by any means. So I want one of those 2 primarily. But if I really can't make it work, or I really want to talk myself into differentiated lineups, it's going to be Morikawa, who I talked about from an outright standpoint. But at 11-9, I think he's not going to get that popular, because 600 is a big difference between he and Rory. But I think everyone's going to get to Rory. Justin Thomas is a popular name. A lot of other ways to go. So I think that every one of my lineups is going to have one of those 3 names in it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The problem I'm having is like with Morikawa specifically, because I had in my notes, I want either Scotty or Rory. But the case you make for Morikawa is very compelling. He is a $600 discount from McIlroy. He is a $1,300 discount from Scotty. And like we talked about, the form for Morikawa is very good. You do get some win equity with him, obviously, given the number of runner-ups he's had recently. So my initial gut was to say I want one of Rory or Scotty, but you're making me hesitate and think I need to wiggle Morikawa in there as well.
I mean, ideally, you get, Morikawa's at the bottom of that tier.
Yeah.
But whenever you're talking about really handcuffing yourself by plugging in Scotty, if you're trying to get up to a secondary stud, like to me, Morikawa is a standout above. There's no slight to JT or anything, but it's a good secondary tier behind. If we just say JT, Hideki, Morikawa, Rory, and Scotty, I think it's a pretty good tier, but a bit of a fall off behind that. So I want to experiment with getting 2 of those names, and realistically, the most likely name I'm going to get to is Morikawa instead of Rory, Because if you go Scotty, Rory, you get 85, 75, and I don't know. You're basically needing a 1-2 finish between those two in a way. And it's not that dissimilar with Morikawa as well. But maybe the real play here is tinkering with Rory and Morikawa lineups and just saying, hey, Scotty's going to finish like T8. He's going to be good, but saved enough salary to kind of differentiate and make some things happen.
Yeah, if you go Rory, Morikawa, and then I just keep putting Gary Woodland in the lineup to kind of see what I can do. What could go wrong? 92-67 left for 3 golfers. If you do that, that's doable. So I think that's another build to consider. So again, I think that the fun thing this week is you got a lot of ways to build things. I guess my approach would be, let's say you're a person who plays 5 single entry lineups. I might have 5 different roster constructions, honestly, and just say, who are the best guys in this approach? Who are the best guys in this approach? And kind of that thing, because I don't care about the individual names. It's more about like the build for this week. Like, yeah, like, I don't know. I guess that's kind of the way that I would view it. So I want to vary my roster construction multi-entry this week. Honestly, still have not decided where I'd go if I had a single bullet. I think if I had a single bullet, I would lean towards one of them plus JT, but I'd want to vary it up. I think that's kind of where I settle it right now.
I think the most interesting approach or a very interesting approach, I won't say the most, in a single entry is maybe to start with Morikawa or JT, which basically means you're saying, hey, Scotty, Rory, I get it, but they're not going to win.
Yeah.
Even if you combine their win equity at FanDuel, it's like 33%, 32.5%. A lot of potential for them not to win. Mm-hmm. And of course, they can make it in to tournament winning lineups with the optimal without winning. But you say, hey, I think Morikawa or JT or insert your second tier stud of your choice is going to win. And that's going to deny Scotty and Rory those winning fantasy points on FanDuel. And therefore, I don't have to rely on a Gary Woodland or a Denny McCarthy or a Mackenzie Hughes to come through. There's a lot of merit to that this week.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too. So think about the roster construction quite a bit. But let's dive now below Morikawa. What are other guys you as priorities? I'm assuming JT based on what we discussed, or is he more of like I'd like to, but I'm not going to like go out of my way kind of thing?
I think it's a little more of that, honestly. Okay. I still think Morikawa JT starts are really interesting. I don't know if it saves you enough to be like the play. You're 91.75 left with those two.
Yeah.
It's not that substantially different than some of these like tweaks you've been making, but JT is my fourth name of preference, a little bit above Hideki, which kind of sounds silly because Hideki's playing some great golf as well. But I prefer JT to Ludwig and Hideki by a little bit.
Yeah, I do as well. That's where I settle in there. Anybody else in the 10,000 range? We'll get to like the Straka range in a bit, but like in this 10K range, Sung Jae 10.8. You got Tom Kim in there, who we were on last week. Jordan Spieth looked good last week again, which was encouraging. Anybody else in this 10,000 range who you're like, I'd like to get there as maybe a consolation prize if you want to get your top stud and then jump down a bit more from Justin Thomas?
Potentially Sung Jae.
Okay.
I mentioned the concerns with the irons, but he's played well here. Again, leads the board. I think he's fine, but realistically, I'm probably not going to get there.
Yeah.
Just based on how everything else goes. And then from there, I think the first name that would really draw me in would probably be Tommy Fleetwood, who's really, really good right now. But I honestly don't know that I can get there. It's more likely I'm getting to like that Pendrith McIntyre tier.
Yeah.
As opposed to getting up to Fleetwood and Straka.
We talked Sepp. The $200 from him and Højgaard and McIntyre does go a long way. Is that kind of the main reason why he's not someone who you're drawn towards here?
I mean, if I go with even, I don't know, if I go like Morikawa JT and then Fleetwood and Straka, like you're down to 82. So you're kind of doing one or the other.
Yeah.
But if I would do like Pendrith and McIntyre, it's 85 per golfer. Like I don't know. Even that's tough. So the idea of getting multiple names above 10K who aren't JT and above just feels really, I don't know how I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I think again, it's a build you can tinker with, but it does make life pretty difficult. So I agree with you. Where the first person, honestly, like I don't mind Sung Jae, I don't mind some of the guys in this range, but realistically, I'm probably not going to use any of them. I think that just I prefer the other routes, going a bit more. JT is like the lower end, jamming in a Rory and Morikawa start, stuff like that. I think that's my preferred way for this week. So the next guy would be Straka, but really more so it's Højgaard 99 as being the guy I feel really good about. $99 again for Rasmus Højgaard for this week. Distance is there, good finish in the PGA Tour to kind of legitimize what he did in the DP World Tour. I think that's really fun. I like Pendrith in 98, kind of a similar profile to Højgaard. We've seen it more in the PGA Tour Pendrith, but also the good Torrey Pines history. So I think that Højgaard and Pendrith, like you talked about the build where you could go with both. I'm probably going to do that. Like have at least, one of those 5 builds where I get to both, just because I think that this is the best range outside of the Scotty, Rory, Morikawa range. This is the best range to me this week.
Yeah, I think we're talking about this range, but there's also, so like we got Taylor Pendrith, we got Sam Burns at 97, we got Russell Henley at 96. I think the fact that they all exist there, and no shade to Thomas Dietrich, who, like, how could you look at what he did last week and kind of not be impressed? This is probably enough for me not to get to. Like, it really does feel like Sepp at his peak is better than these guys.
Yeah.
Fleetwood as well, but honestly, to get 3 of these names in a lineup with one concession in the 7K range is probably where I'm going to be more often than not, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Burns too. I think that 97 firm's pretty good. I probably would rather bet Burns than play him in DFS. I think that's a better route to exposure, but I do like both.
Yeah.
Like, let's say I really like my lineup. I've got 100. I'm 100 over the cap with Pendrith in there. I'm fine dipping down to Burns. Like, he would be a guy break glass in case of emergency kind of thing. Not my preference, but I think that do still like him there. All right, let's scroll down a bit more. What other names are standing out to you as we get into the mid to low 9,000 range?
I
had none.
Max Grazerman at 91, potentially. Adam Scott at 9,000.
Yeah.
It's not great. There's cases to be made for everyone here, but
sure,
not a lot. I like Siwoo, who's on the screen now at 89. But I don't feel great about any of these names, which is also another reason why I'm okay like taking a chance on some lower names.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my kind of thought process too, because I liked Højgaard, I liked Pendrith. My next guy I actually liked was Scott at $9,000. Adam Scott, 9,000. Again, really good irons recently. He's at least 0.72 gain per round in 4 straight per data golf. Solid distance, good putter, good all-around player. He was runner-up at Torrey Pines back in 2019, finished 10th in 2021. So like, got the track record too. I think that makes a lot of sense. So Scott in a range I'll probably be in decently often is a guy I do like down here. Don't mind Siwoo at 89. I kind of like Wyndham at 89. I bet Wyndham for a top 10. I think it's 6-1. Like, he's volatile. We know he can be weird, but last week finished 16th at the Phoenix Open, despite having like a really weird, he missed like a shortish putt and then missed the tap in as well. So like, finished 16th, but could have been better than that. He gained 0.48 strokes putting at the event despite that. Irons were good too. That's the key thing with him is the irons are really up and down, really inconsistent. As a baseline, they're not really there, but they were good there. So I think that's enticing. 37th at the Farmers in 2023. He's played Torrey Pines 6 times total. I need a big payoff in order for Wyndham to be like a guy I turn towards, but we actually do get that this week. 89. So I think he makes sense for this week. Any inclination for you towards Wyndham Clark at the Genesis?
It's fine.
Okay.
I understand the case, but probably a little more likely to go with Siwoo. If you want to talk about inconsistency, but high ceiling, well, Siwoo, but also just below Siwoo is Daniel Berger at 88 kind of showed. I mean, he's again just been really inconsistent with his play, but T2 last week, and I don't know. I mean, I get it. If you're going to take like chances, I'd rather take a chance on someone with high upside, like a Wyndham Clark, a Daniel Berger, a Siwoo Kim, than, no shade to, I'll just say some other names down here. Like, give me those guys at least, because this is a signature event, and it's going to take a lot to knock off all these names in good form.
Yep, I agree with that too. Okay, so let's scroll past the upper 8,000 range. Anyone else in the 8,000 range, maybe the lower end of that you want to target this week?
Potential. So two guys actually I just lifted from the last 3 months of data, but Cam Davis at 84 in theory would play well here because he's long off the tee. He's not a golfer that I tend to like a lot, but fifth at Pebble last time out. Irons are kind of stabilizing a little bit. Not the best form here, but it's not dreadful by any means. And then Austin Eckroat, another name that I've talked about in recent weeks. I did miss the cut at the Phoenix Open. He just loses so consistently around the green that it's hard to trust him. But there's no such thing as trust down in this range. I know you like Gary Woodland just fine.
I'm not using the T word there. That's for sure.
So like, I would really, sure, I'd love to have lineups with Rory and Scotty, but yeah, there's going to be no missed cuts this week. But if you have a golfer who's just really struggling, it's the same thing. So I'd probably like to keep every golfer in my lineup with an 8 at the front of their salary.
Sure.
So Eckroat might be the last place I look. And even then, it's a little shakier and I might try to get back up. So I know it might be a little bit of a cowardly way to go about it, but that's my baseline. There are people I'll take stabs at, but what are you seeing?
Okay, so you mentioned Eckroat, Cam Davis as being guys you consider. I don't mind some of the guys who aren't going to stand up for distance, but are just decent, I think, all-around golfers. That being Lucas Glover, 84. I think he's kind of the prime guy. I'd be like, yeah, I could see it with him. Okay with that. Denny McCarthy to an extent at 83. He's actively short, but like, go ahead.
No, I mean, he's another name. It's what's the true upside at a signature event like this?
Yeah. That's a fair question. It's
lack of form here, but it's in terms of not playing it a ton, but he's on the list as well.
Yeah. Other guy we've talked about him. I've had him on the screen like 16 times. Is Gary Woodland. Kind of just like fun to see Gary Woodland like playing a golf again, a guy you want to root for after all the stuff that he went through. $7,800 for him. Another good event at the WM Phoenix Open. Finished 21st there. Distance has been awesome for Woodland. Iron's been pretty solid too. He can have bad weeks in the green, as we know, but it's $7,800. He has a path to upside. He's played Torrey a ton, had some good results here in the late 2010s. So I do like that 78. Kind of have to make sure I don't get too aggressive as far as roster rates, because like you said, I'm not going to trust him. But like I'm going to use him is what I would say. Other guy I want to mention is someone you actually referenced earlier in the show. Did not reference him here, which is somewhat concerning. But Mackenzie Hughes at 73 is another guy I think is solid, given that the salary is very, very low at 73. Irons for Hughes will never be like a forte by any means, but the short game is really good. He's not bad as far as distance, not just like a short game merchant as we got some other guys. So I think there's enough there with Mackenzie Hughes at 73 to be okay with him. I can use him as like, okay, I've got, 40% Woodland. I got to dump out of a bit of that. I can use Mackenzie Hughes as a crutch to kind of do that. I can kind of use Lucas Glover as a crutch to do that. So I think that's kind of the way I'm using these guys. But to me, Woodland's only like borderline love down here.
Yeah. Hughes, I'm going to get there to make things work.
Okay.
He's got the best combined short game, so around the green and putting in the field over the last 50. And yeah, the rank of his approach play is not great, but he is a positive plus 0.10 per round with approach. So you could do worse. And like you mentioned, he is slightly above average in distance. So he does do something for me. And he's not really going to putt his way out of like a good finish. It's just a matter of how far behind he falls with the short game. Or sorry,
I
with
can
the ball striking.
Also get the Canada stack with
True.
Pendrith, which is important. So that's the main draw, not the fact that he's low salaried. Okay, who are your loves for DFS this week when all is said and done?
It's got to be Scotty because he's the name that I really want to get to. If his only drawback is poor wedge play right now, that's not going to last forever. Probably then Taylor Pendrith.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling a lack of conviction here. Russell Henley. And I guess Adam Scott.
Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense. Scott 9,000, Henley 96, Pendrith 99 or 98, and Scotty 13-2. If I'm talking about loves in terms of like most likely to be in my like main lineup or like the first lineup I build, it's actually Pendrith, Højgaard, and Gary Woodland. I think everything else is kind of negotiable. So I'd like to get two of the guys in the mid-range in there personally. I think that's kind of where I settle in as far as like I have one lineup. That's where I want to build in. So I think my actual loves this week are going to be Taylor Pendrith 98, Rasmus Højgaard 99, Gary Woodland 78, and then strong like for Scotty, Rory, Morikawa, JT, guys like that, Adam Scott being in that range too. So a weird week in terms of my loves for this week.
Yeah, I can't knock that. Being flexible on Scotty and Rory and whoever you like beyond that, whether it's Morikawa, JT, could be Hideki or Ludwig. I think that's a smart way to lay it out.
Okay, so let's finish up here with our win picks this week. I didn't check my bobble hat because I'm pretty sure Ricky withdrew, so I just didn't bother after that point. Or I'm pretty sure I had him. I knew he withdrew, but I'm pretty sure he was in my lineup. So I just didn't check. So I'm assuming you get first dibs as far as whether you want to pick first and fourth or second and third for win picks.
I did win. I will pick first and fourth, and I will take Taylor Pendrith at 40-1.
Why'd you do this to me?
Hey, try winning one of these, and you get to pick.
Yeah, fair. And also, like, I guess I get the
get the wraparound.
I get real money. No, I get real money if Pendrith wins, so I can wipe the tears away with actual dollars. So I guess that helps. So you got Pendrith at 40. I'll go with the other two guys I bet. Justin Thomas 18-1 and Rasmus Højgaard 40-1. I'm fine with both those guys. I would have picked Pendrith over Højgaard, but that's fine. I think that they were somewhat samey for me, so I'm fine with that. So I've got JT 18, Højgaard 40. You have Pendrith 40, and I'm assuming you're going to go Morikawa 14.
Morikawa Bunga, baby.
Morikawa Bunga back in our lives, 14-1 as Brandon's other win pick for this week. Any final thoughts for you for the Genesis Invitational before we close up shop?
I know I say this a lot, but a lot of different ways to go this week when you build lineups. I think that you have a really the Scotty conundrum's back, but it's a little bit lessened because there's some great golfers playing some great golf right now.
Yep.
But I would just say, even if Scotty's plus 400, that doesn't make him completely unplayable.
Yeah.
If the value is right, I think it's a little bit still too short, but not that far. So don't let the number itself scare you away if it's something that you like.
Yep, I agree with you as well on that. With Scotty, he is still a force to be reckoned with for sure. That is all that we have here for this week on the Heat Check. But back with you once again next week on Tuesday, breaking down our thoughts on the next PGA Tour event every Tuesday on the FanDuel Research Podcast feed. Go get that wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review. And of course, these shows do now go on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. So if you're watching this on YouTube right now, A, thank you. B, leave us a thumbs up there. C, subscribe. D, turn on notifications, get notified as we post each of these videos here. Brandon, if people have questions for you on social media, where can they find you there?
I'm on X at Gdula13, GDULA13, and on Blue Sky at Gdula.
And I am on both X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your bets and your DFS lineups for the Genesis Invitational. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast.